Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the dry, sun-baked heart of Sinaloa, Mexico, a place where the dirt roads kick up ochre clouds behind worn-down trucks and the mountains loom like quiet sentinels. You can almost hear the cicadas grinding out their nightly chorus, feel the warm air clinging to your skin, and smell the earthy tang of cornfields barely getting by. This is the cradle where Alfredo Beltrán Leyva, the boy who would one day be known as Mochomo, first opened his eyes. It's a setting that feels timeless, but it's also one of quiet desperation. Sinaloa isn't just farmland. It's one of the beating hearts of Mexico's drug trafficking networks. Even as a child, Alfredo would have heard whispers of shadowy men and dangerous deals. You probably wouldn't survive a week here, at least not if you were soft. This was a place that carved people into stone or left them behind. And Alfredo, though he didn't know it yet, was already on the slow road to being carved. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the world connect in our little corner. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. He's small, wiry, and quiet, the kind of kid who blends into a crowd but watches everything. Born into a family that worked hard just to keep food on the table, Alfredo spent his earliest years helping in the fields, learning to handle tools and animals with steady hands. Some evenings, his father would take him along to the market, where Alfredo would study the way men haggled over prices with sharp, practiced words. It was a lesson in power and perception. He might only be a boy, but he was already aware that appearances could mean everything in a town like theirs. The Beltrán Leyva family was close-knit, bound by blood and survival. His older brothers, Arturo, Hector, and Carlos, were protective of him. They all shared the same lean build and serious eyes, the kind that didn't blink easily. Though the family kept up the image of simple agricultural workers, everyone in Sinaloa knew how easy it was to drift toward the edges of cartel life. The mountains here hid more than just wild goats. They hid opium poppy fields and clandestine airstrips. Drug money was an open secret, and kids Alfredo's age grew up knowing which questions not to ask. He was an observant child, but not timid. He had a way of stepping back from the noise and seeing the bigger picture, even if he didn't always understand it. One of his first memories was of a neighbor suddenly vanishing. One day the man was tending goats. The next, his family was loading up a pickup truck and leaving town. Alfredo overheard adults muttering about debts and betrayal, though no one said the word cartel aloud. That word had weight. Many people still think that moments like this are what sharpened Alfredo's awareness of danger. But what do you think? Could a single, unexplained disappearance set a boy on edge forever? Or was it the constant hum of threat in the background that shaped him? By the time Alfredo reached his teenage years, he had developed the kind of quiet resilience that life in Sinaloa demanded. He wasn't the kind to pick fights, but he wouldn't back down from one either. His brothers took note. Arturo especially kept him close, teaching him lessons about loyalty and self-discipline. Family first, Arturo would tell him. Even when it hurts, it's worth pausing here to remember that the 1980s in Sinaloa were a turbulent era. The U.S. was ramping up its so-called war on drugs, and Mexican traffickers were reorganizing into more powerful cartels. The Guadalajara cartel was splintering after the arrest of its leader, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. and its fragments would form the foundations of the future Sinaloa cartel. For Alfredo and his brothers, these seismic shifts were happening just beyond the horizon, but the tremors could be felt even in their remote town. He noticed, too, the subtle markers of wealth that occasionally flash through their community. A shiny new pickup truck parked outside a modest house, a neighbor suddenly wearing expensive boots, children boasting about their father's mysterious business trips. Alfredo might not have had much, but he was smart enough to connect the dots. It wasn't just the lure of money. It was the sense of control, of not having to worry about the next meal, or whether the fields would yield enough to survive another year. At night, lying in bed under the tin roof of their small home, Alfredo would listen to the wind rattle the walls and think about the future. He knew he didn't want to be a farmer forever. He wanted more, though he didn't know what that more would look like yet. What he did know was that the Beltrán Leyva name was strong, and his brothers had ambition. It was only a matter of time before they would pull him deeper into their world. One afternoon, while helping Arturo repair a fence, Alfredo asked a question that had been simmering in his mind. What happens if someone betrays the family? Arturo stopped, gave him a long look, and then, without breaking eye contact, hammered the nail into the wood. They don't, he said simply. Because they know the cost. That was the kind of lesson that stuck. Alfredo was beginning to understand that loyalty wasn't just about love. It was about survival. Betrayals didn't just hurt feelings. They destabilized everything. And in a world as fragile as theirs, stability was priceless. By his late teens, Alfredo's quiet demeanor was masking a growing confidence. He had a knack for staying unnoticed, which made him useful in situations where others might draw attention. This ability would soon catch the eye of men beyond his family. They saw in him a rare quality, someone who could operate in the shadows without complaint, someone who, if guided carefully, might one day be trusted with far more than farm chores. But for now, Alfredo remained the dutiful younger brother, learning lessons in silence, watching his family's influence expand, and beginning to feel the weight of a future he couldn't yet name. He didn't know it, but the choices he would make in the years ahead would set him on a collision course with history. And once that path began, there would be no turning back. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva grows up in a house where the kitchen table is always crowded. His brothers, Arturo, Hector, and Carlos, make up the backbone of his world, and from the moment he can remember, they've treated him as part of a unit. No decision is made alone. When someone is sick, the rest cover the work in the fields. When someone is in trouble, the others show up without questions. That's how it is in the Beltrán Leyva family. By the early 1990s, the brothers' bond is beginning to harden into something more deliberate. Arturo, the eldest, has a commanding presence, a man who can walk into a room and everyone falls silent without knowing why. Hector, the sharpest talker, carries himself with a politician's ease. He's the one who can make people feel like they're being heard even as he steers them where he wants. Carlos is the brawler, quick to laugh and quicker to throw a punch if anyone disrespects the family. And then there's Alfredo, the quiet observer who soaks in everything and rarely lets on what he's thinking. The brothers start to cultivate their roles almost without discussing it. Alfredo, for instance, is often the one sent on errands that require discretion. He's good at blending in. A pair of dusty jeans, a plain shirt, a downturned gaze. Nobody pays him much mind, and that's exactly the point. Arturo notices how easily his youngest brother fades into the background and begins to imagine ways that could be useful. Family dinners are full of low-voiced conversations that Alfredo isn't always included in, but he listens anyway. He catches fragments about friends in Culiacan, about police officers who look the other way, about opportunities that come and go with the harvest. Everyone knows that farming alone won't keep them afloat forever. Alfredo's uncles have already tried migrating north to find work in the United States. They send money home when they can, but it's hardly enough. One night, after most of the house has gone to sleep, Alfredo finds Arturo sitting on the porch smoking a cigarette. He sits beside him, silently at first, until Arturo passes him a glance. "You're thinking too much," Arturo says softly. Alfredo shrugs. I don't know where this is all going," he admits. Arturo's expression hardens into something that's not unkind, just realistic. It's going where it has to. Family takes care of family. We can't wait for someone else to hand us a future. The sentiment lingers in Alfredo's mind. It's not like Arturo is announcing any grand plan, but it's clear they're on the edge of something bigger. And sure enough, in the months that follow, the brothers begin to expand their network. A cousin introduces them to men linked to the broader Sinaloa underworld, traffickers who control the mountain routes that feed drugs north into the United States. These men aren't flashy. They keep to themselves and speak in half sentences. But Alfredo sees the respect they command, and it makes him wonder if this might be their ticket out of poverty. He's young, still barely in his late teens, but he's beginning to understand the mechanics of power. It isn't just about money. It's about who owes you a favor and how you collect on it. He watches Arturo negotiate with these new contacts, never promising more than he can deliver, and Hector smooths over potential conflicts with the right words at the right time. Alfredo mostly keeps his mouth shut, but he's always paying attention. By this time, the Sinaloa cartel itself is evolving. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, recently escaped from prison for the first time, is reasserting control over territories that used to belong to the old Guadalajara cartel. Many people still think that the Beltrán Leyva brothers were minor players at this stage, just one of many regional crews jockeying for position. But what do you think? Does a crew like theirs suddenly rise out of nowhere? Or is it more likely they were already quietly laying down roots? Alfredo's role in the family is growing more defined. He isn't the charismatic leader, that's Arturo, but he's invaluable in his own way. If a package needs to move across a checkpoint without drawing attention, Alfredo is the one entrusted with it. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't complain about the long hours or the danger. That steady reliability earns him more trust than he realizes at the time. There's one memory from this period that sticks out. The brothers are in a small house in the hills, waiting for a shipment to arrive. It's late, the room lit by a single weak bulb, and everyone's tense. A knock at the door makes everyone jump, but it's only a courier delivering news that the load has made it across the border safely. Arturo lets out a rare smile and turns to Alfredo. "You see, this is what we can do if we stay sharp." That night, Alfredo lies awake and thinks about the possibilities. Their world is still dangerous, but it no longer feels small. They're connecting with bigger players now, men whose names carry weight. He knows they'll need to be careful, but he also knows there's no turning back. Historical fact. By the mid-1990s, the Sinaloa cartel had become one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world, controlling major smuggling routes into the United States. The Beltrán Leyva's growing association with El Chapo Guzman positioned them as valuable allies in this larger network. Alfredo senses that the family's fortunes are shifting. He doesn't feel untouchable. That's never been his style. But he does feel that the brothers are stronger together than they've ever been. If one of them falls, the rest will pick up the pieces. That's the unspoken rule. And yet, even now, there's a faint edge of paranoia creeping in. Alfredo notices how Arturo double-checks the doors at night, how Hector asks more questions about who's talking to whom. They all know that alliances can shift in an instant. One mistake could cost them everything. For now, though, the brothers remain united. Alfredo is still the quiet one in the corner, watching, learning, preparing for whatever's coming next. Alfredo's teenage years roll forward with the steady inevitability of a freight train picking up speed. By the time he's edging toward 20, the line between their family's legitimate agricultural work and their growing underworld connections is blurring fast. It's not as though anyone is talking openly about smuggling, at least not in words that an outsider would understand. But Alfredo can see how the pieces are lining up. Trucks that used to be loaded with tomatoes or corn are now carrying sealed packages hidden under false floors. The brothers' trips to Culiacan are more frequent, and they no longer feel like simple errands. Alfredo doesn't question it. He has grown up in Sinaloa long enough to understand that questions invite trouble. What matters is the trust Arturo places in him. His eldest brother doesn't let just anyone handle sensitive jobs, and Alfredo knows how fragile that trust can be. If he makes a mistake, it's not only his life at stake, it's the entire family. One summer afternoon, Arturo calls him into the back room of their modest house. There's a map spread out on the table, a rough sketch of routes cutting through mountain passes and dusty highways. Arturo taps a point with his finger. "You're going here tomorrow," he says. "No one needs to know the details. Just get the truck to the rendezvous." Alfredo nods. He doesn't ask what's in the truck or who he'll be meeting. It's better that way. If he doesn't know, he can't accidentally let it slip. He leaves the room with the quiet weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. The job goes smoothly, almost anticlimactically so. He drives through the night, the hum of the engine his only companion, and delivers the truck to a man who greets him with a curt nod. There's no conversation, just a brief exchange of keys and a silent understanding that Alfredo will be paid later. But as he drives home, he feels something shift inside him. This was his first brush with the narco world beyond family errands, and he handled it without flinching. That small success earns him more work. Soon, Alfredo is trusted to manage delicate logistics, arranging transport, making sure shipments move without police interference, and occasionally delivering messages to men far more dangerous than himself. He learns quickly that in this business, information is currency. One wrong word in the wrong ear can get someone killed. He also learns that discretion breeds respect. Because Alfredo doesn't brag about what he's doing, people begin to rely on him. He becomes the kind of person who can be counted on to keep secrets. And in Sinaloa, that's as valuable as gold. Arturo starts calling him Mochomo, a nickname that roughly translates to fire ant. Small but relentless, the kind of insect that can build colonies underground without anyone noticing until it's too late. By the mid-1990s, the brothers are fully integrated into the Sinaloa cartel network. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman values their loyalty and their ability to manage territory without drawing unnecessary heat. The cartel's operations are expanding into new markets, and the Beltrán Leyvas are perfectly positioned to handle the flow of cocaine and heroin through their home state. Alfredo isn't a frontline enforcer, he's a logistics man, a problem solver. And in a world where violence often grabs headlines, the quiet operators are the ones who actually hold everything together. There's one night that captures this balance perfectly. Alfredo is in a safe house outside Culiacán, waiting for a shipment from Colombia to be broken down and redistributed. The men around him are nervous, pacing the room and checking their weapons. Alfredo, by contrast, sits calmly at the table, sipping coffee. He isn't fearless, exactly, but he knows panic is contagious. If he keeps his composure, others will follow. When the truck finally arrives, Alfredo is the one who inspects the packages. He counts carefully, notes any irregularities, and makes sure everything is ready for distribution. It's tedious work, but it's also crucial. Any mistake could set off a chain reaction. Many people still think that Alfredo was simply following orders during these years. But what do you think? Is it really possible for someone to play such a central role in a cartel's logistics without making independent decisions? Could it be that Alfredo was already shaping the operation in subtle ways, even if others didn't realize it? He rarely sees El Chapo in person, but he hears enough stories to understand the man's power. Chapo's ability to evade capture is legendary, and his influence over politicians and police is the stuff of whispered conversations. Alfredo admires him, but he also knows that alliances in this world can be fragile. Today's partner could be tomorrow's enemy if the balance shifts. The brothers make a point of staying close. Their unity is their strength, and they know it. Arturo continues to be the strategist. Hector manages political contacts. Carlos handles enforcement, and Alfredo keeps the machine running smoothly in the background. They complement each other, and that synergy is what makes them so effective. Yet Alfredo is starting to notice cracks forming at the edges. Corruption is rampant, but it's also unpredictable. A bribe that worked last month might fail today if the wrong official has been replaced. Rival cartels are constantly testing boundaries, sending feelers into Sinaloa territory to see how far they can push. And even within their own organization, there are moments when trust feels conditional. He doesn't dwell on it, though. There's no room for second guessing in this business. For now, his focus is on building a reputation as someone who can be counted on, someone who gets the job done without drama. Historical fact: in the mid-1990s, the Sinaloa cartel was solidifying its dominance over major smuggling corridors into the United States, often outmaneuvering rivals through a combination of corruption, violence, and logistics. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's emerging role in managing shipments made him a key part of this infrastructure. Even if his name wasn't widely known at the time, Alfredo may still be a young man, but he's already walking a path from which there's no easy return. Every successful delivery, every secret kept, pulls him deeper into a world where loyalty can be the difference between life and death. And deep down, he knows that the family bond holding the Beltrán Leyvas together will soon be tested in ways none of them can imagine. Alfredo's growing presence in the organization doesn't happen with fireworks or bravado. It's more like the gradual tightening of a knot. Each job Arturo gives him is slightly more complex than the last, and Alfredo completes each one without complaint, rarely drawing notice from those outside the family. He's the kind of person you forget was in the room, until you realize he was the one who made everything work. By the late 1990s, the Beltrán Leyva brothers are more than just allies to Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. They're trusted pillars within the Sinaloa cartel's sprawling empire. Alfredo knows how unusual this is. Most crews are treated like replaceable parts, easily discarded if they make a mistake. But the brothers have earned something more substantial. Arturo's intelligence, Hector's political savvy, Carlos's muscle, and Alfredo's discretion make them a formidable force. One evening, Alfredo finds himself riding in the back seat of a black SUV winding through the mountain roads of Sinaloa. Beside him, a trusted lieutenant hands over a sealed envelope. "This one's delicate," the man says, not elaborating. Alfredo doesn't need details. The instructions are always the same. Deliver it without fail. Tell no one where you're going, and don't ask questions. He does exactly that, driving through the night until he reaches a safe house on the edge of Culiacan. The recipient is a man with the kind of sharp eyes that make you feel like you're being weighed on an invisible scale. He takes the envelope with a curt nod and disappears inside, leaving Alfredo with nothing but the sound of the door locking behind him. These kinds of jobs become routine, and with each one, Alfredo's reputation grows. He's dependable, invisible, the fire ant who quietly keeps the colony alive. Arturo recognizes how valuable that makes him and begins to involve him more directly in planning. Alfredo learns how to read border checkpoint schedules, how to time shipments to avoid patrols, how to build redundancy into every route. If one truck is intercepted, another will already be en route by a different path. There's an unspoken rule in the cartel: the less you're seen, the safer you are. But Alfredo isn't naive. He knows his low profile won't shield him forever. Rivals are always watching, and law enforcement is tightening its grip. One misstep could expose everything. During this period, Alfredo witnesses his first major betrayal. A trusted associate is caught skimming from a shipment. Nothing huge, just a handful of kilos that went missing without explanation. Arturo calls a family meeting in a warehouse outside town. The accused man pleads for forgiveness, insisting it was a misunderstanding. Alfredo stays silent, watching Arturo's expression harden. Finally, Arturo gives a small nod, and Carlos steps forward. The man is gone before Alfredo even processes what's happened. It's a chilling moment. He understands, intellectually, why it had to be done. Stealing from the cartel is an unforgivable sin, but the speed and finality of it still shock him. Later, Arturo pulls him aside. "This is what loyalty looks like," he says quietly. "It's not about affection. It's about keeping the structure intact. If one brick crumbles, the whole thing collapses." Many people still think that Alfredo was simply a passive observer in these moments. But what do you think? Can someone watch a man disappear like that and remain untouched? Or is it more likely that Alfredo absorbed the lesson deeply, the way he absorbed all of Arturo's teachings? Historical fact. By the late 1990s, the Mexican government's efforts to combat cartels were inconsistent at best. Corruption within law enforcement and politics created an environment where traffickers could operate with relative impunity as long as they kept paying the right people. Alfredo begins to understand how critical those payments are. He sees Hector spending long hours in Culiacan, cultivating relationships with politicians and police commanders. "We can't fight everyone," Hector explains one night over dinner. "We have to know who we can buy and who we can't. That's the difference between survival and a raid at dawn." Alfredo listens carefully. He has no interest in becoming a public figure, but he understands that knowing the right people can mean the difference between walking free and vanishing into a prison cell. As the family's influence grows, so does the money. Their once humble farmhouse is replaced by larger properties with high walls and security gates. New trucks appear in the driveway, and the brothers begin to move through the world with a quiet confidence. But Alfredo, even as he benefits from the wealth, remains wary. He remembers the betrayals he's already witnessed, the thin line between power and downfall. There's one particularly tense evening when Alfredo and Arturo meet with a senior figure from another cartel faction. The man makes a subtle threat, implying that the Beltrán Leyvas are growing too powerful for their own good. Alfredo doesn't respond. He leaves that to Arturo, who diffuses the situation with calm authority. But inside, Alfredo feels the chill of recognition. They are no longer the underdogs, and that makes them a target. Still, he stays the course. The brothers' unity is their greatest asset, and Alfredo intends to do his part to preserve it. He becomes even more meticulous in his work, double-checking every shipment, every route, every contingency plan. If a storm is coming, and he suspects it is, he wants the family to be ready. But storms, as Alfredo is learning, have a way of arriving sooner than you expect. Alfredo's instincts about the looming storm aren't wrong. By the early 2000s, the Sinaloa cartel's dominance is both undeniable and increasingly precarious. They control vast swaths of smuggling routes into the United States, and their operations stretch from Colombia's coca fields to safe houses in Texas and California. But that very success makes them a prime target, not just for rival cartels, but for Mexican and American law enforcement as well. Inside this rising tide, the Beltrán Leyva brothers thrive. Arturo's strategic mind ensures they're rarely caught flat-footed, and Hector's connections among politicians and police commanders buy them a buffer from raids and investigations. Carlos handles the strong-arm side of the business, keeping would-be challengers in line. And Alfredo? He's the one who makes the machine run smoothly. Shipments are routed with surgical precision, and mistakes are rare. When something does go wrong, Alfredo has a backup plan ready before anyone even asks. He's also learning the unspoken code of survival. It isn't just about being ruthless, though that's part of it. It's about making yourself indispensable, so that removing you would cause more problems than it solves. Alfredo's knack for logistics gives him that leverage. He's quiet, almost unassuming, but people know better than to underestimate him. One evening in Culiacan, Alfredo attends a gathering at a safe house. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and the low murmur of voices. Around the table sit men who are shaping the future of Mexico's underworld. Lieutenants, financiers, armed enforcers with dead calm eyes. Alfredo doesn't say much, but he notices everything. Who's laughing a little too loudly? Who avoids eye contact when El Chapo's name comes up? Who seems eager to impress? Later, Arturo pulls him aside. "You've got a talent for reading people," he tells Alfredo. "That's how you stay alive in this business. Don't ever ignore that instinct." Those instincts are tested soon enough. Word begins to spread of a potential betrayal. Someone within their circle feeding information to law enforcement. The whispers are vague, but they're enough to put everyone on edge. Alfredo starts double-checking the security on his routes, making sure nothing can be traced back to him or his brothers. Historical fact. In the early 2000s, Mexican authorities, often under pressure from the U.S., intensified efforts to capture high-ranking cartel figures. Joint operations between Mexican military forces and the DEA became more common, leading to significant arrests. But corruption at multiple levels also meant that information about these operations often leaked back to the cartels. Alfredo can feel the walls tightening, though he doesn't show it outwardly. He notices how often Hector is on the phone with political contacts, how Arturo is more guarded than usual in meetings. Even Carlos, usually the most hot-headed, seems unusually tense. One night, Alfredo finds himself driving a convoy of vehicles transporting a large shipment north. Everything is supposed to be routine, but as they approach a checkpoint, he spots something off. The soldiers look too alert, their vehicles positioned in a way that suggests they're waiting for someone specific. Alfredo makes a split-second decision and diverts the convoy down a back road. The detour costs them hours, but it also saves them. News filters back later that the checkpoint was a trap set up after a tip-off. Someone in their network had betrayed them, and if Alfredo hadn't trusted his instincts, they would have lost millions of dollars worth of product and possibly their lives. When Arturo hears about it, he doesn't praise Alfredo outright. He simply places a hand on his shoulder and says, "You did right." That quiet acknowledgement means more to Alfredo than any words of gratitude could. Many people still think that Alfredo's cautious nature made him a liability, that his paranoia led him to see threats where none existed. But what do you think? Was it paranoia, or was it survival instinct? After all, in this world, being too trusting could get you killed. Despite the close call, business continues. The cartel's operations are too vast to stop for long, and Alfredo throws himself back into his work. But the betrayal gnaws at him. He begins to scrutinize everyone in their orbit, wondering who might be the mole. At the same time, he's becoming increasingly aware of how fragile their alliance with El Chapo really is. The Sinaloa cartel isn't a monolith. It's a collection of powerful factions held together by mutual interest. If those interests ever diverged, Alfredo knows the results could be catastrophic. For now, though, he focuses on what he can control. Every shipment that crosses the border without incident is a small victory. Every bribe that lands in the right hands buys them a little more time. But Alfredo can feel it in his bones. The storm is getting closer, and it's only a matter of time before it breaks. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva wakes each morning with the same instinctive caution that's been slowly hardwired into him over the years. Even at home, behind high walls and with armed guards stationed at the gates, he never feels entirely at ease. He can hear it in the way Arturo gives clipped instructions, in how Hector watches people with a new edge of suspicion, in the way Carlos seems a little quicker to draw his weapon. The brothers have built their lives on loyalty, but they all know that loyalty is a currency that can be bought or sold in a heartbeat. By 2004, Alfredo is well known in cartel circles as the man who makes things happen quietly. He's no flashy figure, no tabloid fodder kingpin. He prefers it that way. He's the one who coordinates shipments of cocaine and heroin through Sinaloa, Sonora, and Baja California, ensuring that the routes remain clear and predictable. When problems arise, Alfredo is the first to arrive and the last to leave. He rarely raises his voice, but when he speaks, people listen. It's this reputation that earns him the trust of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, though Alfredo knows that trust in this world is provisional at best. Chapo values results, and Alfredo delivers them, but he's also aware that any misstep could make him expendable. He keeps that thought in the back of his mind as a reminder to stay sharp. One evening, Alfredo meets with Arturo in a sprawling ranch house outside Culiacan. Arturo is reviewing intelligence from their contacts in law enforcement. The Americans are pushing harder, Arturo tells him. The DEA wants more arrests, more extraditions. They're leaning on the federales, and the federales are leaning on everyone else. Alfredo nods silently. He's seen the increased patrols on their usual routes, the sudden raids that seem almost too well-timed to be coincidence. It's clear that someone is leaking information. The brothers try to adapt. Alfredo adjusts shipment schedules so no pattern can be detected. He uses multiple decoys to confuse potential surveillance and makes sure that only a select few know the full details of any operation. But even as he strengthens security, he knows they can't control everything. The reality is simple. The more powerful they become, the bigger the target on their backs. Historical fact. Around this time, the Mexican government began deploying its military to fight cartels in select areas, a tactic meant to counteract local police corruption. These militarized raids often relied on intelligence shared by U.S. agencies, but the cartel's own networks of informants frequently tipped them off in advance. Alfredo begins to notice more strange faces around Culiacan. Vehicles with tinted windows that linger too long near their safe houses. Strangers asking questions about shipments in towns along their routes. He doesn't like it. He starts moving between properties more often, never staying in one place for more than a night or two. One night, as he's leaving a warehouse where a shipment has just been divided for distribution, he gets a call from Hector. "We need to talk," Hector says, his voice low and clipped. "There's word Chapo doesn't trust us anymore." Alfredo freezes. He's known for years that the alliance between their family and El Chapo was fragile, but hearing it out loud still sends a chill through him. "What changed?" he asks. Hector hesitates. "Some say we're holding back profits. Others think we're too close to certain politicians he can't control. Whatever the reason, he's watching us. We need to be careful." This isn't news Alfredo wants to hear, but it's not surprising either. He's seen it happen before. Alliances shifting, friends turning into rivals overnight. Many people still think that El Chapo's suspicion of the Beltrán Leyvas was baseless, that it was all paranoia. But what do you think? Could Chapo have seen something the brothers didn't? Or was he simply laying the groundwork for a betrayal of his own? Alfredo spends the next few weeks reinforcing every safeguard he can think of. He avoids using phones for sensitive conversations, sends trusted couriers with messages instead. He makes sure that even if their enemies strike, they won't be able to dismantle the network in one blow. But even as he works tirelessly, he knows that the real danger isn't necessarily from outside forces. If the alliance with Chapo crumbles, it could be the spark that sets off a war. And Alfredo, for all his caution, isn't sure the family is ready for that kind of fight. One evening, he sits alone on the porch of one of their safe houses, watching the last light fade from the hills. He thinks about how far they've come from those dusty childhood days in Sinaloa, when their biggest concern was whether the fields would produce enough to feed the family. Now they're dealing in fortunes and risking everything for power. He takes a slow breath and reminds himself of the rule Arturo drilled into him. Family first, no matter what. If the storm comes, and he knows it's coming, he'll stand with his brothers. But in the pit of his stomach, he can't shake the feeling that the ground is already shifting beneath their feet. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva sits in a quiet room one night in late 2004, listening to the distant hum of crickets. The meeting he just left still plays in his head. Arturo, Hector, and Carlos had been tense, even more so than usual. Whispers of betrayal within their network had grown louder, and no one could ignore them anymore. They knew the Sinaloa cartel's alliances were beginning to crack. Alfredo's role as the family's silent operator suddenly feels heavier. He's been the man behind the curtain for years, keeping the machine running. But now, the very secrecy that makes him valuable is also isolating. He's one of the few who truly understands how much they stand to lose if the trust between the Beltrán Leyvas and Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán collapses. In the following weeks, Alfredo sharpens his habits. He no longer stays at any safe house longer than a single night. He sends shipments in smaller loads, breaking up the risk, and insists on tighter need-to-know protocols. Only a handful of trusted lieutenants are privy to full operations now. It's a delicate balance. Too much secrecy breeds suspicion, but too little invites exposure. Historical fact. By 2005, the Sinaloa cartel was arguably at the height of its power, responsible for shipping tons of cocaine and heroin into the United States each year. Yet U.S. and Mexican authorities were increasing pressure with joint operations, often relying on cartel insiders for intelligence. This created an environment where paranoia thrived. Alfredo is not a man who indulges in paranoia for its own sake, but he sees the warning signs everywhere. He notices how Arturo double-checks the doors even when they're in secure compounds. He sees Hector making more frequent trips to Mexico City to smooth relations with politicians. Carlos, usually the most outgoing, has become more withdrawn, his temper shorter than ever. One night, Alfredo is driving a small convoy of trucks through a remote mountain pass when he spots something out of place. A flash of movement near a ridge, just enough to send a chill down his spine. He orders the drivers to pull back immediately, retreating to an alternate route. Hours later, they learn that a rival group had set up an ambush on the road they had been about to take. Alfredo's caution saved the entire shipment, and likely the lives of the men driving those trucks. He doesn't boast about it. He simply notes the incident in his records and moves on. But it reinforces a belief he's carried for years. Survival depends on seeing the threat before it strikes. Meanwhile, the alliance with El Chapo continues to erode. Chapo is a man known for his meticulous control, and he's beginning to view the Beltrán Leyva brothers as an independent force he can't fully command. Rumors circulate that Chapo suspects them of holding back profits, of building a parallel network of political contacts that might challenge his dominance. Alfredo can feel the tension every time they share space with Chapo's faction. There are fewer jokes, fewer moments of camaraderie. Conversations are measured, words chosen carefully. Many people still think that these cracks were inevitable in a cartel as large as Sinaloa's. But what do you think? Was it ambition that drove the wedge deeper? Or simply fear that one faction would one day betray the other? One particularly uneasy meeting stays with Alfredo. He and Arturo sit across from Chapo at a secluded ranch house. Chapo's expression is unreadable as he asks pointed questions about recent shipments and finances. Arturo answers calmly, but Alfredo can feel the heat rising in the room. Chapo doesn't accuse them outright, but the message is clear. He's watching them closely. Afterward, as they drive away, Arturo is silent for a long time. Finally, he says, "We need to be ready for anything. If Chapo decides we're a threat, he won't hesitate." Alfredo doesn't respond. He knows Arturo is right. He also knows that no amount of preparation can eliminate the danger entirely. In the weeks that follow, Alfredo doubles down on his work. He rotates stash houses more frequently, reinforces security at key properties, and ensures that every member of their crew understands the stakes. He isn't naive enough to think that they can stop what's coming, but he wants to make sure they're not caught off guard. Late at night, lying awake in yet another safe house, Alfredo can feel the walls closing in. He remembers Arturo's lesson from years ago. Family first, no matter what. But the threat they now face isn't just external. It's inside their own alliance, and Alfredo can't shake the fear that the storm he's been dreading is finally about to break. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva has always believed that calm is its own weapon. a way to see clearly when everyone else is blinded by fear. But as the years creep into the late 2000s, even he feels the sharp edge of anxiety. The cartel world is shifting fast, and no amount of careful planning can keep every threat at bay. He can sense it in the air. Rivals are hungrier, the government is more aggressive, and the fragile trust with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman is eroding by the day. The Beltrán Leyva brothers still wield immense influence, but Alfredo knows that power can turn to liability in an instant. The stories of fallen capos are everywhere, cautionary tales whispered at night. The first major bloodshed comes unexpectedly. One of their trusted operators is ambushed in a city on the border, gunned down alongside several men from Arturo's crew. It's a clean hit, carried out with the kind of precision that makes Alfredo's stomach twist. Whoever did it knew the exact timing and route of the convoy. Arturo convenes a meeting at a secure compound in Culiacán. The brothers sit around a long wooden table, the mood thick with anger. "This wasn't random," Arturo says, his voice cold and steady. "Someone is feeding information." Alfredo doesn't argue. He's already replaying the logistics in his head, trying to determine where the breach could have occurred. "We need to tighten everything," he says quietly. "No one moves without clearance. No one knows the full route but us." Carlos slams a fist against the table. "We should start making examples," he growls. "People need to be afraid again." Alfredo doesn't disagree, but he knows fear alone won't solve their problem. The enemy is already inside their perimeter. Punishing the wrong person could make the situation even worse. Historical fact. In the mid-2000s, cartel violence in Mexico escalated dramatically as rival groups fought for territory. The Mexican government's increasing reliance on the military led to large-scale raids, and the cartels responded with even greater brutality. Over the next few weeks, Alfredo focuses on shoring up the network. He cuts off anyone whose loyalty is questionable, even if it costs them revenue. He consolidates operations in areas where they have the most control and stops shipments along routes that feel compromised. It's a defensive posture, and Alfredo knows it can only buy them time. But then another blow lands. A warehouse filled with product is raided by Mexican Marines. They arrive with surgical precision, hitting the location at the exact moment a large shipment was being prepared. Alfredo hears the news as he's inspecting another stash house, and he feels his chest tighten. There's no way they could have known about that warehouse without inside information. The brothers meet again, this time in a more remote location. Arturo's jaw is set, and Hector looks pale. "Chapo is behind this," Arturo says finally. "He's feeding information to the government and letting us take the hits. He wants to weaken us before he cuts us out entirely." Alfredo doesn't want to believe it, but the pieces fit too well. He thinks back to the wary glances in recent meetings, the probing questions Chapo asked about their finances. Many people still think the split between the Beltrán Leyva brothers and Chapo was inevitable, that it was just another power struggle in the endless cartel wars. But what do you think? Was this a calculated betrayal, or simply a convenient way to remove a potential threat? For Alfredo, the realization is bitter. He has spent years ensuring that their alliance with Chapo remained strong, and now it's all unraveling. The family is being hunted, and they no longer know who they can trust. One night, Alfredo sits alone on the balcony of a safe house, staring at the distant lights of Culiacán. He thinks about the early days, about Arturo teaching him that family came first, about the quiet confidence they once shared. That sense of security feels like a distant memory now. He knows they're entering a new phase, one where every move could be their last, and yet He can't allow fear to paralyze him. If the Beltrán Leyva brothers are going to survive, they'll need to strike back harder than ever. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva wakes up each morning now with a knot in his stomach. The rhythm of life has shifted. Where once there was routine, routes, shipments, meetings, all planned with clockwork precision, there is now uncertainty. Every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call feels like the opening act of a betrayal. The brothers can no longer deny that someone has been leaking information. The raid on their warehouse and the ambushes of their men have cut too deep. Arturo is livid. And even Hector, usually the diplomat of the family, is showing signs of fraying. Carlos grows more aggressive by the day, snapping at subordinates and warning that the next suspected traitor will not be given a chance to explain themselves. Alfredo spends his days auditing the organization from top to bottom. He reviews every shipment log, every security detail, every communication channel. He visits stash houses unannounced, checks the books with a fine-toothed comb, and questions everyone who touches their operations. He doesn't shout, but his quiet presence is intimidating. People know that if Alfredo is looking at you for too long, you might not be around much longer. Still, the paranoia doesn't solve the underlying problem. The family is bleeding money and product. Shipments are being seized with uncanny accuracy, and their once reliable networks are fraying. Politicians and police commanders who used to take Hector's calls are now hesitating, sensing the brothers' vulnerability. Historical fact: in 2007, Mexico's President Felipe Calderón declared an all-out war on the cartels, deploying tens of thousands of soldiers to drug trafficking hotspots. This militarization increased pressure on the cartels, but also drove violence to unprecedented levels as groups fought back. Alfredo sees the government pressure building and knows it will only amplify the danger from within. He sits with Arturo one night in a safe house outside Culiacán, their conversation hushed. "We're losing control," Arturo admits. "The men feel it. Our allies feel it. And Chapo, he's circling like a vulture." Alfredo nods, his expression unreadable. "We can't show weakness," he says. "If we do, we're finished. We have to close ranks and make sure no one doubts our strength." But privately, Alfredo worries. He's watched enough power struggles to know that appearances can only do so much. If Chapo is truly orchestrating their downfall, their options are limited. Fighting him outright would ignite a war they might not survive. Yet doing nothing would almost certainly guarantee their destruction. The brothers' internal dynamic is beginning to strain. Carlos pushes for retaliation, arguing that they should strike first against Chapo's faction. Hector counsels caution, pointing out that such a move could provoke open conflict and draw even more government attention. Arturo tries to balance the competing viewpoints, but the stress is wearing on him. Alfredo remains focused on shoring up their defenses. He changes the location of meetings at the last minute, rotates security teams, and doubles the number of safe houses they use. He also keeps a close eye on his own men, watching for signs of disloyalty. It's exhausting work, but Alfredo knows that complacency could be fatal. One afternoon, Alfredo receives word that another trusted lieutenant has been killed. The details are murky, but it appears he was lured into a trap and executed. Alfredo feels the familiar chill of recognition. This isn't random violence. Someone is deliberately dismantling their organization piece by piece. Many people still think that the Beltrán Leyva brothers overreacted to these betrayals, that they let paranoia cloud their judgment. But what do you think? When every move you make is being anticipated, is it really paranoia? Or is it survival? That night, Alfredo gathers with his brothers in a fortified compound. The air is thick with tension. Arturo speaks first, his voice low but firm. We can't keep waiting for the next hit. We need to take control of the situation. If that means breaking with Chapo, then so be it. Alfredo feels a hollow ache in his chest. Breaking with Chapo would mean shattering the alliance that has been the foundation of their rise. It would also mean declaring open war on one of the most powerful figures in the Mexican underworld. But he knows Arturo is right. Their survival depends on decisive action. And deep down, Alfredo suspects that no matter what they do, the days ahead will be soaked in blood. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's unease has hardened into a cold certainty. The family is walking a knife's edge. The raids and ambushes are no longer isolated events. They're a coordinated campaign. And while Arturo and Hector still hold hope that they can salvage their relationship with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Alfredo feels the ground eroding beneath them. In early 2008, the Mexican government's militarized crackdown on cartels intensifies. President Felipe Calderón's forces sweep through Sinaloa with unprecedented aggression, raiding properties and seizing shipments in what seems like a daily rhythm. The media celebrate each bust as a victory in the so-called war on drugs. But Alfredo sees something more troubling. The precision of the government's actions suggests they're working from inside information. That information, Alfredo believes, is coming from Chapo. The thought haunts him. Chapo has always been a calculating operator, willing to sacrifice allies if it strengthened his own position. Alfredo knows the family has become too powerful for Chapo's comfort. They have their own networks of corrupt politicians and police commanders, their own loyal lieutenants, their own influence over the flow of narcotics. In Chapo's eyes, that makes them a threat. The brothers gather in a secluded compound outside Culiacan to discuss their options. Arturo is uncharacteristically quiet at first, then says, "If we wait any longer, we're dead. We need to treat Chapo as an enemy." Hector hesitates. "That's a war we can't win outright," he warns. "Chapo has more resources, more reach. We need to outthink him, not just outgun him." Carlos, as expected, leans forward, his jaw tight. "We can start by hitting his men hard. Show them we're not afraid. People will see we're strong." Alfredo listens, his mind racing. He knows that once they make a move against Chapo, there's no turning back. Many people still think the Beltrán Leyva brothers could have de-escalated the situation. But what do you think? Would backing down have bought them safety or simply made them easier prey? In the days that follow, Alfredo quietly reconfigures the family's operations. He stops all major shipments, instructing lieutenants to lay low until further notice. He consolidates cash reserves and reinforces security at their most vulnerable properties. It's a defensive posture, but it also signals something important. The brothers are preparing for open conflict. Meanwhile, rumors swirl through Sinaloa's underworld. Word spreads that Chapo is plotting to eliminate the Beltrán Leyvas and that he's feeding intelligence to the Mexican Marines. Alfredo's worst fears seem to be coming true. Historical fact: in January 2008, the Mexican military captured Alfredo's cousin, Alfredo El Mochomo Cardenas, who was deeply involved in cartel operations. Many analysts believe this arrest was the turning point that triggered the final break between the Beltrán Leyva brothers and Chapo's faction. Alfredo feels the pressure closing in like a vice. He begins moving constantly, changing locations every night, never sleeping in the same safe house twice. He knows the Marines are out there. possibly watching him at this very moment. One evening, as he's traveling between safe houses, he notices a black SUV in his rearview mirror. It's following at a distance, never getting too close. Alfredo's heart rate stays steady, but he adjusts his route, taking a series of back roads to see if the vehicle stays with him. It does. He calls one of his security men in a low voice. "We're being tailed," he says. "Have a team ready at the next rendezvous." But when Alfredo arrives at the safe house, the SUV has disappeared. He walks inside, his mind already running through possibilities. Was it the Marines? Rival cartel gunmen? Or simply a coincidence? He doesn't have the luxury of assuming the best. That night, he barely sleeps. He dreams of dusty Sinaloa roads and the sound of engines drawing closer. The next morning, he sits with Arturo and Hector again. "We're being hunted," Alfredo says flatly. "If we don't act now, they'll pick us off one by one." Arturo's face is set. "Then we act," he replies. Alfredo doesn't argue. He knows the decision has been made. From this moment on, they're no longer allies of El Chapo Guzman. They're adversaries in a conflict that will shape the future of the Mexican underworld. And Alfredo, the quiet operator who has always worked in the shadows, is now a marked man. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva knows the fragile alliance with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman has finally shattered. The decision to sever ties wasn't made lightly, but once the brothers decided to treat Chapo as an enemy, there was no going back. Alfredo senses the gravity of this choice more than anyone. For years, their operations have depended on the infrastructure and protection that came from being part of the Sinaloa cartel. Now, they stand alone. The first weeks of the break are defined by silence, the tense, suffocating kind that Alfredo has always feared. Chapo doesn't respond publicly, doesn't send emissaries, doesn't even leak threats. That absence is unsettling. Alfredo knows Chapo is calculating, patient. If he isn't striking now, it's because he's waiting for the perfect opportunity. Alfredo channels his unease into preparation. He strengthens their lines of communication, limiting them to a handful of trusted couriers. He moves cash and assets out of vulnerable stash houses and into hidden reserves. He knows that once Chapo moves against them, their finances will be among the first targets. Arturo convenes a family meeting at a fortified ranch. Around the table, the brothers lay out their strategy. "We hit his people first," Carlos insists, pounding a fist against the wood. "Make them afraid to touch us," Hector shakes his head. "If we're too aggressive, we'll draw the government straight into our laps. We need to strike, yes, but carefully." Alfredo, ever the quiet observer, speaks last. "We need to cut off his eyes and ears," he says. "If he can't see us, he can't hunt us." Many people still think the Beltrán Leyvas underestimated Chapo's power, that they couldn't match his intelligence network. But what do you think? Could any amount of preparation have truly insulated them from someone as embedded as Chapo? The brothers act quickly. Several suspected informants within their ranks are removed, quietly and decisively. Word spreads fast that betraying the Beltrán Leyvas is a death sentence. Alfredo doesn't relish the violence, but he knows it's necessary to keep their people in line. Historical fact. This period marks the beginning of the infamous split between the Beltrán Leyva organization, BLO, and the Sinaloa cartel. Analysts often cite this rupture as one of the primary catalysts for the explosion of violence across Mexico's drug war in 2008 and beyond. The break also affects their political protection. Officials who once took Hector's calls now hesitate, afraid of choosing the wrong side. The brothers' influence is waning, and Alfredo can feel it with every unanswered phone call. One evening, Alfredo sits alone in a darkened safe house. He's been reviewing reports from their lieutenants, scanning for patterns, and one detail keeps nagging at him. Shipments are still being intercepted with alarming precision. It's as if Chapo knows their movements before they make them. He thinks about the network of spies and informants Chapo has cultivated over the years. He knows that no matter how many leaks they plug, there's a good chance information is still flowing to their enemies. That night, Alfredo dreams of their childhood in Sinaloa, of dusty roads and the sound of Arturo hammering nails into a fence. He wakes with a start, the image of their early lessons in loyalty lingering in his mind. Family first, no matter what, Arturo had said. Alfredo clings to that mantra now, even as he feels the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. In the weeks that follow, the brothers begin to retaliate. They target Chapo's allies with surgical strikes, ambushing convoys and disrupting supply lines. Each hit is meant to send a message. The Beltrán Leyvas may be smaller, but they are far from finished. The Chapo doesn't flinch. He responds with quiet, devastating precision. Several of the brothers' top lieutenants are killed in quick succession, each death eroding their operational capacity further. Alfredo can feel the net tightening. He spent years making himself invisible, the man who kept the gears turning in the shadows. But now, he knows he's become a priority target, and deep down, he can't shake the feeling that time is running out. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva moves like a ghost now, changing cars, switching phones, and sleeping in a different location every night. He's mastered the art of invisibility, but even invisibility has limits. The Mexican Marines and their U.S. counterparts are closing in, armed with intelligence that feels too precise to be coincidence. Alfredo suspects what he's always feared. Chapo is feeding information directly to the authorities. This new reality gnaws at him. He has spent his entire life building a reputation for discretion and reliability, and now that same reliability makes him a priority target. If he falls, the brothers' entire structure will begin to collapse. One night, Alfredo and Arturo sit together in a remote ranch house, going over what's left of their operations. The candlelight throws shadows across Arturo's face, making him look older than Alfredo has ever seen him. "We're bleeding," Arturo admits. "Every week it's another loss. Money, product, men. If this keeps up, we won't survive the year." Alfredo nods silently. He's felt the same weight. "We need to disappear for a while," he says. "Shut everything down, lay low, and rebuild when the heat dies down." But Arturo shakes his head. "Chapo won't give us that time. He'll take our silence as weakness and finish us off." It's a brutal truth. Many people still think the Beltrán Leyva brothers might have survived longer if they had simply scattered and gone to ground. But what do you think? Could retreat have saved them, or was it already too late? Historical fact. By early 2008, the Mexican military had intensified its efforts against high-value cartel targets. The government, working closely with the DEA, was prioritizing figures like Alfredo El Mochomo Beltrán Leyva, who was believed to control major smuggling corridors. Alfredo is aware that his options are narrowing. He begins traveling with a much smaller security detail, knowing that large convoys are too easy to track. He uses low-profile vehicles, avoids major highways, and minimizes contact with anyone outside the immediate family. He's become a man in constant motion, but the pace is wearing on him. One afternoon, while moving between safe houses, Alfredo gets a call from Hector. "Another one of our men is gone," Hector says, his voice tight. "They found him outside Hermosillo. Whoever did it left a message. We're next." Alfredo closes his eyes for a moment, feeling the sting of inevitability. He knows the warning isn't just bravado. Their enemies are dismantling the organization piece by piece, and the Marines are circling closer with each raid. Despite the growing pressure, Alfredo remains methodical. He reorganizes the smuggling routes, pushing shipments through less obvious corridors. He shifts cash reserves into smaller caches scattered across multiple states. He even changes the rhythm of his days, waking and traveling at unpredictable hours to avoid patterns. But no amount of caution can erase the reality that his enemies have resources he can't match. Chapo's network is too vast, his influence with law enforcement too deep, and Alfredo's very position as a high-value target means the Marines will never stop hunting him. One night, Alfredo's driver spots a convoy of unmarked trucks parked near a back road they had planned to use. They turn around immediately, disappearing into the darkness, but the close call rattles Alfredo. He's starting to feel like prey. Back at a safe house, he tells Arturo, "We're not going to make it out of this if we keep running like rabbits. We need a real plan." Arturo stares at him for a long moment, then says, "Our plan is to survive, brother. Nothing else matters now." Alfredo doesn't argue, but he knows survival is becoming less and less likely with each passing day. He lies awake that night, listening to the wind against the walls, and wonders if he will live long enough to see the dawn. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva knows the walls are closing in. Every decision feels like a coin toss between survival and capture. He wakes before dawn most mornings, the weight of uncertainty pressing harder than any alarm clock could. The rumors of an informant within their inner circle refuse to die. Alfredo has tried to plug every leak, changing safe houses, limiting communications, rotating security teams, but the raids are still too precise. Someone is feeding the Marines information, and Alfredo fears it's only a matter of time before they get the one piece of intel they need to end this. Arturo summons the brothers and their most trusted lieutenants to a secluded compound deep in the Sinaloa hills. The mood in the room is heavy, every face lined with fatigue. Arturo paces as he speaks, his voice sharp. "We've lost too many men, too much product. We can't keep reacting. We need to find the source and cut it out." Carlos, ever the most aggressive, suggests rounding up suspects and making examples of them. Hector urges restraint. "If we kill the wrong people, we'll push others away," he says. "We need evidence, not guesses." Alfredo listens quietly before finally speaking. "We can't rely on anyone outside this room," he says. "From now on, everything stays between us. If a single detail leaks, we'll know it came from here." Historical fact. Around this time, Mexican intelligence agencies were working closely with the DEA to target high-level cartel figures. These operations often relied on insider information, either from captured associates who cooperated or from planted informants within the organizations. Alfredo knows that the government's focus on him is no accident. He's considered one of the key architects of the Beltrán Leyva organization's logistics network. If they take him down, they cripple the entire operation. He becomes even more meticulous. He insists on triple-checking every planned movement, often scrapping entire routes at the last minute if something feels off. He changes vehicles constantly, drives without headlights on rural back roads, and rarely sleeps more than a few hours at a time. One night, while hiding out in a ranch house far from Culiacán, Alfredo wakes to the sound of dogs barking furiously. His hand goes to the pistol on the nightstand as he creeps to the window. Outside, he sees nothing but darkness. Eventually, the barking stops. Alfredo lies back in bed but doesn't sleep for the rest of the night. The strain is beginning to show. He's lost weight, and the constant moving has left him hollow-eyed. But he can't afford to relax. He remembers Arturo's words from years ago. Family first, no matter what. and uses that mantra to keep going. Many people still think that Alfredo's caution was a sign of weakness, that his paranoia made him easier to catch. But what do you think? Can you really call it paranoia when you're being hunted by armies on both sides of the border? One afternoon, Alfredo gets word that another of their warehouses has been raided, this one containing millions of dollars in product. The hit is devastating, but what chills Alfredo more is how quickly it happened. Someone gave up the location only hours after the shipment arrived. He sits with Arturo that night, the two of them speaking in low voices. "We're running out of time," Alfredo says. "If we don't find the leak, we're next." Arturo nods grimly. "Then we find it," he replies, "no matter what it takes." As Alfredo lies down on a thin mattress in the corner of the safe house, he thinks of the quiet roads of his childhood, of the simple life that seems so impossibly far away now. He wonders how much longer they can keep dodging the inevitable. The answer, though he doesn't know it yet, is not long. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva wakes each day now with a sense of dread he can't quite shake. He moves through the routines of survival, switching vehicles, checking the perimeter of safe houses, double-checking coded messages, but the effort feels like a delaying tactic rather than a solution. He knows they're closing in. The news from the outside world offers no comfort. Raids on their warehouses and convoys continue at a punishing pace, each one slicing away at the Beltrán Leyva organization's strength. Allies are drifting toward El Chapo's faction, unwilling to risk being associated with a sinking ship. And through it all, Alfredo can't escape the feeling that someone very close is feeding their enemies information. The brothers meet one night in a fortified compound outside Culiacán. Arturo, Hector, Carlos, and Alfredo sit around the same wooden table they've shared for years, but now it feels like a war council. "We're losing control," Arturo says bluntly. "If we keep reacting, we're finished." Hector suggests retreating and consolidating in a single stronghold, but Carlos bristles. "That's exactly what Chapo wants, to box us in," he argues. "We need to strike back hard and make them pay." Alfredo listens, his fingers steepled, before speaking. "Striking back might feel good," he says quietly, "but it won't solve the real problem. Chapo has eyes on us. Until we blind him, every move we make is a risk." The others fall silent, knowing he's right. But no one has a clear answer for how to blind a man whose network seems limitless. Historical fact: in early 2008, Mexican Marines intensified joint operations with U.S. agencies like the DEA. These missions were often built around high-value targets like Alfredo El Mochomo Beltrán Leyva. Using intelligence from informants, the Marines executed raids with alarming precision. Alfredo is aware he's at the top of every list. He travels lighter now, often with only a single driver and one armed guard. Convoys draw too much attention, and he can't afford to be predictable. Each time he enters a safe house, he mentally maps escape routes in case he needs to flee on a moment's notice. One evening, Alfredo receives a tip from a loyal lieutenant. Federal forces are planning a raid in Culiacán. The details are vague, but the timing matches a meeting Arturo has scheduled with several allies. Alfredo doesn't hesitate. He calls Arturo and insists they cancel the meeting. Arturo resists at first. "If we keep canceling, people will think we're weak," he argues. "Better they think we're weak than watch us walk into a trap," Alfredo replies. The meeting is postponed, and sure enough, word comes the next day that Marines swarmed the property where it was supposed to take place. Alfredo's decision likely saved Arturo's life, but the reprieve is small comfort. They're still being hunted. Many people still think Alfredo's caution doomed him, that he became too isolated to maintain control. But what do you think? When every move you make is anticipated, is isolation really a flaw, or the only way to stay alive? Late one night, Alfredo stands on the balcony of a safe house, staring out at the dark hills. He can hear the hum of cicadas, the distant bark of a dog. It almost feels peaceful, but he knows it's a lie. Somewhere out there, men are planning his capture. He remembers the words Arturo drilled into him years ago. Family first, no matter what. That principle has guided him his entire life. But now, Alfredo wonders what will become of his family if he's taken. He knows the organization will struggle without him. As he turns to go back inside, Alfredo has the eerie sense that this could be one of his last nights of freedom. He doesn't dwell on it. There's no room for self-pity. But the thought lingers as he locks the door behind him. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva wakes before dawn, the faint glow of the horizon barely breaking through the curtains of the safe house. He doesn't need an alarm anymore. His body is conditioned to live in perpetual vigilance. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant rumble of an engine makes his muscles tense. It's been weeks since he's truly slept, but there's no time to think about rest now. Arturo had warned him the night before. Federal forces were stepping up operations in Culiacan. There were whispers of fresh intelligence provided by informants, whispers Alfredo has heard too many times to dismiss as paranoia. He moves through his morning ritual with deliberate care, changing SIM cards, rotating cash from one safe location to another, scanning messages from their few remaining allies. By mid-morning, Alfredo is sitting at a small wooden table with his brothers in a secluded compound on the outskirts of the city. The mood is grim. Hector reports that another ally has defected to El Chapo's faction. Carlos growls something about making them regret it. But Alfredo stays silent. He's thinking about the bigger picture. Their organization is unraveling, and the next misstep could be fatal. Maybe it's time to move out of Sinaloa entirely, Hector says quietly, breaking the silence. We can rebuild elsewhere, away from Chapo's reach. Arturo shakes his head. We leave Sinaloa, we lose our power base. He wins. Alfredo leans forward, speaking softly but firmly. We're running out of options. Chapo's people have ears everywhere. The Marines are moving with intelligence they shouldn't have. Staying here is suicide. The brothers don't reach a decision, but Alfredo knows time is slipping away. That night, he moves to yet another safe house, this one in a quiet residential neighborhood in Culiacan. It's modest compared to their fortified compounds, which is exactly why he chose it. He believes blending in might give him an edge. But early the next morning, his worst fears materialize. At around 8 a.m., Alfredo wakes to the sound of engines, multiple vehicles pulling up outside. He springs out of bed, heart pounding, and peers through the blinds. What he sees makes his blood run cold. Armored trucks and uniformed Mexican Marines fanning out around the property. There's no time to think. Alfredo grabs the pistol from the nightstand and darts to the back door. But as he does, he hears the heavy thud of a battering ram against the front entrance. The walls tremble. Shouts echo through the house. He considers making a stand, but he knows it's pointless. The Marines have overwhelming numbers, and Alfredo has no illusions about how this will end if he tries to fight. He sets the gun down on a nearby table and raises his hands just as the front door bursts open. The Marines flood the house in seconds, rifles trained on him. One shouts orders in rapid-fire Spanish, pushing him to the ground and cuffing his wrists behind his back. Alfredo doesn't resist. He stares at the floor, his mind strangely quiet. Historical fact. On January 21st, 2008, Mexican Marines captured Alfredo El Mochomo Beltrán Leyva in Culiacán in a swift operation. The arrest was considered one of the most significant blows to the Beltrán Leyva organization and marked a turning point in the Mexican drug war. As he's escorted outside, Alfredo sees neighbors gathered behind police tape, watching the spectacle. He can hear the click of cameras, the voices of journalists shouting questions. It's a surreal moment, and he can't help but think about how far he's fallen from the boy who once worked the fields of Sinaloa. Many people still think Alfredo's capture was inevitable, the result of his growing isolation. But what do you think? Could he have escaped if he'd fled earlier? Or was this always the way his story would end? The Marines push him into the back of an armored truck. Alfredo sits in silence as the convoy pulls away, the city blurring past the windows. He knows this is the beginning of something much worse, and that his arrest will ignite a chain reaction no one can control. As the truck rumbles toward its destination, Alfredo allows himself one final memory of the quiet Sinaloa nights of his youth. The chirping of cicadas, the warmth of the breeze, the faint hum of family laughter drifting from the porch. He closes his eyes, knowing he may never feel that peace again. The news of Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's arrest spreads like wildfire through Sinaloa and beyond. Within hours, every major Mexican and international outlet is reporting that El Mochomo, one of the most trusted logisticians and leaders of the Beltrán Leyva organization, has been captured by the Mexican Marines. His image, cuffed and flanked by masked soldiers, is plastered across television screens and front pages. For Arturo, Hector, and Carlos, the arrest is more than just a devastating personal blow. It's a declaration of war. They immediately suspect Joaquin El Chapo Guzman of orchestrating Alfredo's downfall, feeding information to authorities to weaken the family's position. Arturo's rage is palpable. "He gave them my brother," he tells Hector in a voice tight with fury. "He sold us out to save himself." The surviving brothers convene at a heavily fortified compound to decide their next move. The air is thick with anger and grief. "We can't let this go unanswered," Carlos growls. "If we don't strike back, we're finished." Hector, ever the more calculating voice, warns that retaliation could ignite an uncontrollable war. "If we kill his people, the blood will never stop," he says. But Arturo is already beyond compromise. "The blood has already started," he snaps. "Chapo chose this. Now we choose." Historical fact. Alfredo's arrest on January 21st, 2008, shattered the fragile balance between the Beltrán Leyva organization and the Sinaloa cartel. Within weeks, the BLO broke completely from Chapo's network, sparking one of the bloodiest internal cartel wars in Mexican history. Alfredo, meanwhile, is thrust into the brutal machinery of Mexico's judicial system. He is transported to a high-security detention facility where the cells are cold and the walls feel like they're closing in. Guards watch his every move, and he knows any slip of information could lead to even greater consequences. The isolation gnaws at him. For years, he thrived in the shadows, controlling vast networks of logistics, money, and influence. Now he sits in a concrete cell, powerless. He wonders how his brothers are reacting, if they're still strong enough to hold the organization together without him. In the weeks following his arrest, Alfredo is interrogated repeatedly. Officials want to know everything: the routes, the contacts, the names of politicians on the payroll. Alfredo remains silent, giving them nothing. He knows that the moment he talks, the organization is finished, and he refuses to betray his brothers. Back on the outside, Arturo moves quickly to avenge Alfredo's capture. He orders hits on individuals suspected of aiding Chapo, including government officials and law enforcement officers believed to have participated in the operation. The violence escalates rapidly, with assassinations and ambushes rocking Sinaloa and other cartel strongholds. Many people still think the brothers' retaliation was driven purely by emotion. But what do you think? Was it vengeance, or a calculated message to their rivals that they were still a force to be reckoned with? The violence catches the attention of the international community. U.S. officials begin pressuring Mexico to dismantle the Beltrán Leyva organization completely, arguing that the group poses a growing threat to regional stability. At the same time, rival cartels sense opportunity. With Alfredo out of the picture, the BLO is weaker, and their enemies are eager to carve up their territory. In his cell, Alfredo hears fragments of news about the bloodshed outside. He knows Arturo's anger will not subside, and that his arrest has set off a chain reaction that cannot be contained. He thinks of their childhood in Sinaloa, of Arturo's promise that family would always come first. Now, Alfredo wonders if that promise will drive the family to their ultimate destruction. One night, as Alfredo lies awake on the thin prison cot, he reflects on the decisions that brought him here. Many people still believe he could have fled Mexico before the Marines caught up with him. But Alfredo doesn't dwell on hypotheticals. He focuses instead on the present. The cold walls of his cell, the distant echoes of guards' boots in the corridor, and the knowledge that the world outside is burning in his name. News of Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's arrest is not just a headline. It is a spark that ignites a storm. Arturo, Hector, and Carlos move with a single-minded fury in the days that follow. They are convinced Joaquin, El Chapo Guzman, orchestrated Alfredo's capture, and their wrath is as methodical as it is deadly. The first wave of retribution targets anyone suspected of cooperating with Chapo. High-ranking lieutenants loyal to the Sinaloa cartel are assassinated in broad daylight. Government officials believed to have fed information to the Marines are executed with chilling precision. Bodies left on highways carry messages written on cardboard placards. This is for Alfredo. The violence is calculated to send a message, but it also triggers an avalanche of consequences. Rival cartels seize the moment to expand their own territories. Law enforcement doubles down on operations in Sinaloa, Sonora, and Durango. The country erupts into the kind of bloodshed Mexico has rarely seen before. Historical fact. Following Alfredo's arrest, the Beltrán Leyva organization formally split from the Sinaloa cartel. The resulting war between the two factions contributed to the record levels of violence in 2008 and 2009, with thousands killed as the power vacuum widened. Alfredo, meanwhile, sits in his prison cell, isolated from the chaos he set in motion. He hears whispers from guards about the escalating conflict, about how his brothers are making the streets of Mexico run red. He knows they're acting out of loyalty and vengeance, but he can't help wondering whether the bloodshed will destroy them. In one of his rare meetings with his lawyer, Alfredo asks quietly, "How bad is it out there?" The lawyer hesitates. "Worse than you can imagine," he finally says. "Your brothers are targeting everyone. Chapo's men, government officials, even people who might only be tangentially connected. It's becoming a war on all fronts." Alfredo closes his eyes. He can see Arturo's face, contorted with the kind of grief and rage that will not be reasoned with. He knows his brother well enough to understand that nothing will stop him now. Many people still think the brothers' retaliatory campaign was a strategic misstep, that it spread them too thin. But what do you think? Could they have survived if they had been more measured? Or was total war the only option left to them back on the outside? The killings escalate. Chapo's faction responds in kind, targeting anyone loyal to the Beltrán Leyvas. Cities become battlegrounds, with ambushes erupting on highways and shootouts breaking out in the heart of crowded neighborhoods. Innocent bystanders are caught in the crossfire, adding to the public outrage and fueling even more pressure on the Mexican government to dismantle both groups. The toll on the Beltrán Leyva organization is immense. Trusted lieutenants are killed or captured. Allies defect to rival factions, unwilling to risk being on the losing side. The empire that Alfredo helped build with such meticulous care is crumbling, and he is powerless to stop it. In his cell, Alfredo receives word that one of his closest confidants has been killed. The news hits harder than he expects. He lies awake that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the boy he once was in the dusty fields of Sinaloa. He remembers Arturo telling him that family came first, no matter what. But now, Alfredo wonders if that vow has doomed them all. One morning, guards enter his cell to escort him to yet another interrogation. As they walk down the sterile corridor, Alfredo catches a glimpse of a newspaper left on a guard's desk. The headline screams about the bloodbath consuming Sinaloa. He can't help but wonder how many lives his arrest has cost already, and how many more will be lost before it's over. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's life inside prison has settled into a monotonous rhythm. Waking early, enduring endless counts by guards, and sitting through interrogations designed to wear him down. But beyond the cold walls of his cell, chaos reigns. The war between the Beltrán Leyva organization and Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán's faction shows no sign of slowing. From the occasional snippets of news Alfredo is allowed to see, and from hushed conversations with his lawyer, he learns that the violence is worsening. The government's pressure has doubled since his arrest. Convoys of Marines storm cartel safe houses across the country, seizing weapons, cash, and narcotics. Arturo and Hector respond with fury, deploying hit squads to assassinate police commanders and politicians suspected of colluding with Chapo or federal forces. One afternoon, Alfredo's lawyer brings him an update he has been dreading. A government raid has cost them several more loyal men, including an old ally who had been with the family from the beginning. Your brothers are lashing out harder than ever, the lawyer says grimly. They're taking the fight everywhere. Alfredo nods slowly, but inside he feels the weight of helplessness. For years, he was the man who kept the organization stable, the one who built contingency plans and steered them through crises. Now he's trapped behind steel bars, watching everything crumble. Historical fact. After Alfredo's arrest, the Beltrán Leyva organization's unity began to fray. The group's reliance on violent retaliation alienated allies and made them a top priority for Mexican and U.S. authorities. The government placed bounties on key members, including Arturo and Hector, further destabilizing the organization. The environment in prison reflects the outside tension. Guards treat Alfredo with thinly veiled hostility, aware that his family's war has made national headlines. Other inmates watch him with a mix of curiosity and fear. Alfredo keeps to himself, spending most of his time in the cell, refusing to give anyone a reason to provoke him. One night, he lies awake, thinking about Arturo. He knows his older brother is carrying the full weight of the organization now, and Arturo has always believed in meeting force with force. But Alfredo worries that Arturo's anger will blind him to the bigger picture. Without careful planning, the BLO risks destroying itself. Many people still think that Alfredo's capture was the sole reason the BLO began to collapse. But what do you think? Could the family have survived if Arturo had chosen a different path after the arrest? Or was their downfall already inevitable? Meanwhile, rumors circulate that Alfredo might be extradited to the United States. His lawyer warns that American prosecutors are eager to try him, and that once he's in their custody, he'll face a sentence that will likely keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. The possibility of extradition gnaws at Alfredo. Mexican prisons, for all their harshness, are familiar terrain. In the U.S., he'll be isolated even further, stripped of what little contact he has left with the outside world. He tells his lawyer, "If it happens, I'll deal with it, but I won't give them anything, not one name." Back on the outside, Arturo receives word of the potential extradition and vows to prevent it. If they take Alfredo north, he tells Hector, they'll use him to destroy us, but stopping an extradition is easier said than done. The brothers have lost much of their influence over the political and judicial systems they once manipulated with ease. Corruption can only carry them so far when the full weight of two governments is aligned against them. As Alfredo waits for word of his fate, he begins to reflect on the fragility of the empire they built. He thinks of the endless routes he once managed, the warehouses he kept stocked, the fortunes that flowed through his hands. All of it can disappear in an instant. He closes his eyes at night and imagines the hills of Sinaloa, the place where it all began. But those hills are no longer safe. Even in his mind, Alfredo Beltrán Leyva has learned to measure time in prison differently. Days blur into nights, nights into weeks, and each week brings a new round of interrogations. The authorities are relentless, asking the same questions over and over, hoping repetition will break him down. Names, routes, politicians on the payroll. Alfredo gives them nothing. He knows silence is his last defense, but outside the prison walls, the rumors only grow louder. Guards whisper about a possible extradition to the United States. Alfredo's lawyer confirms the whispers. "The Americans want you badly," he says during a tense visit. "They're pushing for extradition. Once you're there, it will be over. You'll never come back." Alfredo absorbs the news without outward reaction, but inside he feels a cold dread. Mexican prisons are dangerous, yes, but they're familiar territory. In the U.S., he'll be completely cut off. No allies, no protections, no connection to his brothers. "Do we have options?" he asks. The lawyer shakes his head slowly. "We can file appeals, delay it as long as possible. But the outcome is almost certain." Back in his cell, Alfredo lies awake, replaying the conversation. He pictures Arturo, Hector, and Carlos still fighting outside to hold what's left of their empire together. He wonders how they'll cope when he's taken out of Mexico permanently. Historical fact. In August 2014, after years of legal battles, Alfredo Beltrán Leyva was extradited to the United States. He was later sentenced to life in prison for his role in trafficking large quantities of narcotics into the country. At the time of these discussions, however, the brothers are focused on preventing the extradition at all costs. Arturo, in particular, sees it as an existential threat. If they take Alfredo north, he tells Hector, he'll be a bargaining chip. They'll use him to dismantle us piece by piece. But Arturo's ability to influence the system has diminished since Alfredo's arrest. Their political contacts are deserting them, unwilling to cross the Mexican and U.S. governments. And every day the violence escalates, draining resources and eroding the organization's power. Many people still think the brothers should have considered negotiating with authorities at this stage. But what do you think? Could Alfredo have cut a deal to save himself? And perhaps his family? Or was that impossible in a world where betrayal meant death? In prison, Alfredo receives news that yet another lieutenant has been captured. Each loss is another blow to the organization's infrastructure. He can feel the empire collapsing around him, and the knowledge is suffocating. One night, a guard slides a newspaper under Alfredo's cell door. The headline screams about the escalating war between the Beltrán Leyva organization and the Sinaloa cartel. Dozens killed in a single weekend. Politicians calling for stronger military intervention. Alfredo scans the article, noting the names of the dead, most of whom he knew personally. He feels a heavy pang of guilt. His capture has become the rallying cry for a war that's destroying everything he and his brothers built. He pushes the paper aside and stares at the ceiling. He knows Arturo is consumed by vengeance. He also knows that vengeance will not save them. But there's nothing he can do from behind these walls except hope his brothers can see a way forward. As Alfredo drifts into a restless sleep, he hears the echo of Arturo's old words. Family first, no matter what. That promise feels more fragile than ever now, as their family and their empire stands on the brink of collapse. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva wakes each morning in prison with the same gnawing uncertainty. Will today be the day they come for him? The possibility of extradition to the United States looms over every waking thought. The guards don't say much, but Alfredo sees the knowing glances they exchange as they escort him to meals or back to his cell. He can sense something coming. Meanwhile, the outside world continues to burn. Through scraps of news, Alfredo learns that the war between the Beltrán Leyva organization and Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán's Sinaloa cartel has escalated even further. Whole communities are being terrorized, cities paralyzed by rolling gun battles. Innocent civilians are increasingly caught in the crossfire, fueling public outrage and intensifying the government's campaign against both groups. Arturo, Hector, and Carlos are still leading from the front, but Alfredo knows the cost of their vengeance. Their resources are dwindling. Allies are defecting to rival factions or fleeing the country altogether, and every act of retaliation only invites harsher crackdowns from the government. Historical fact. Following Alfredo's capture in January 2008, the Mexican government's joint operations with the DEA intensified dramatically. Extradition became a cornerstone of U.S. policy, with major cartel leaders targeted for transfer to American courts, where lengthy prison sentences awaited. One evening, Alfredo's lawyer visits him with grim news. The extradition request is formalized, he says quietly. We can fight it, but the government is determined. They want you out of Mexico. Alfredo listens in silence. He's known this was coming, but hearing it confirmed still sends a cold chill down his spine. Extradition means permanent isolation, life under a system that will strip him of any remaining influence. He asks only one question. How much time do we have? Months at most, the lawyer answers, but it could be sooner. There's political pressure to make an example out of you. Alfredo nods, but his mind is already racing. He knows Arturo will see this as a call to action, perhaps even attempt a desperate rescue. The thought unsettles him. He doesn't want his brothers to throw more lives away for a plan that's almost certain to fail. Many people still think Alfredo might have been able to strike a deal with U.S. prosecutors, offering information in exchange for leniency. But what do you think? Would such a deal ever have been possible for a man whose entire identity was built on loyalty and silence? In the weeks that follow, Alfredo keeps a low profile. He refuses to speak to anyone except his lawyer and a handful of family members allowed to visit. He knows his every move is being watched, and he has no illusions about the danger he's in. Meanwhile, Arturo grows increasingly unhinged. Sources inside the organization report that he's planning larger and more brazen attacks against Chapo's allies and government forces. If they take Alfredo, Arturo tells Hector, they'll never stop. We have to make them afraid. But Alfredo knows fear is no longer a weapon that can save them. The government is committed to dismantling their organization, and Chapo is determined to erase them from the map. Late one night, Alfredo lies awake on his cot, thinking about the quiet days of his youth in Sinaloa. He can almost hear the cicadas outside his family's old house, the sound of Arturo's voice calling him inside for dinner. Those memories feel like a different life now, one that belongs to someone else. He closes his eyes and tells himself he will face whatever comes next with the same composure that has carried him this far. But deep down, he knows the next chapter of his story is likely to unfold in a place far from Mexico, behind the cold bars of an American prison. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's capture has left a wound the family cannot close. Outside prison walls, Arturo, Hector, and Carlos struggle to maintain control over their shrinking empire. Inside, Alfredo senses that the weight of their survival now rests almost entirely on their ability to adapt. But everything he hears suggests they are moving in the opposite direction. The reports filtering into his prison cell are grim. Arturo's retaliation against Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's faction has grown more brazen and more brutal. Gunmen storm police stations in broad daylight. Convoys of armed men ambush military patrols on rural highways. Messages left at crime scenes declare that the Beltrán Leyvas will not stop until Chapo pays for Alfredo's capture. But Alfredo knows vengeance is costing them dearly. Each strike invites heavier government crackdowns, and the organization's resources are dwindling. Allies are turning away, unwilling to risk being dragged into the spiraling war. Rivals like Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel are moving in to claim territory. The BLO can no longer defend. Historical fact. By late 2008, the Mexican government had launched full-scale operations to dismantle the Beltrán Leyva organization, seizing properties, freezing bank accounts, and arresting dozens of mid-level operators. The group's cohesion began to falter as pressure mounted from all sides. One evening, Alfredo's lawyer visits him with another bleak update. The government is tightening the noose, he says. Arturo and Hector are on every wanted list. There's talk of million-dollar bounties. They're being hunted like animals. Alfredo's face remains unreadable, but inside he feels a twist of dread. He knows Arturo's pride will not allow him to surrender, even if it means the destruction of everything they built. He asks the lawyer about Carlos, the brother who has always been the most hot-headed. Carlos is with Arturo, the lawyer says. They're inseparable, but that makes them easy targets. Many people still think the brothers could have survived if they had sought a truce with Chapo or a deal with authorities. But what do you think? Was peace ever truly an option in a world where weakness is fatal? In prison, Alfredo clings to silence. He refuses to cooperate with interrogators despite repeated offers of reduced sentences in exchange for information. I won't betray my family, he tells one official flatly during an interrogation session. You can lock me up forever. It won't change anything. The officials don't hide their frustration. They know Alfredo is a treasure trove of intelligence, but he gives them nothing. And so they wait, confident that the extradition to the United States will force his hand. Back on the outside, the war grinds on. Arturo's campaign against Chapo and the Mexican government is taking a toll on his own men. Entire cells of loyal gunmen are wiped out in battles with Marines or rival cartels. Morale is plummeting, and whispers of betrayal creep through the ranks. Alfredo receives word that several trusted lieutenants have defected to Chapo's side, seeking protection. The betrayal stings, but he can't bring himself to hate them. He knows they are simply trying to survive. Late at night, lying on his cot, Alfredo replays memories of the old days, riding in beat-up trucks down dusty Sinaloa roads, the sound of Arturo's voice teaching him the importance of family. Those lessons are still etched into his bones, but he wonders now whether they led the brothers down a path from which there is no return. He closes his eyes and whispers the same thought he's carried for months. I hope they survive this. But deep down, Alfredo knows survival is becoming less likely with every passing day. By the end of 2008, Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's imprisonment has become a silent pressure point, squeezing the life out of the organization he helped build. Inside his cold cell, he knows the brothers' influence is waning. Each week brings fresh news of territory lost to rivals, allies abandoning ship, and government raids tearing apart the network they once controlled with precision. Rival cartels are circling like vultures. The Gulf Cartel moves aggressively into Tamaulipas, claiming strategic border crossings. Los Zetas, ever opportunistic, push deeper into former BLO strongholds, their brand of paramilitary violence leaving a trail of fear. Even Chapo's Sinaloa cartel tightens its grip on plazas the Beltrán Leyvas once managed. Historical fact. In 2008 and 2009, the fragmentation of Mexico's major cartels led to unprecedented violence. With the BLO weakened by Alfredo's capture, competing organizations fought fiercely over drug corridors, destabilizing the delicate balance of power across the country. Alfredo hears whispers of this collapse from guards and lawyers, but what haunts him most is the knowledge that his brothers are still locked in an unwinnable war. Arturo is doubling down on revenge, deploying assassins to eliminate Chapo's allies and suspected government collaborators. The killings are brutal, often public, designed to send a message. But for every rival the BLO eliminates, two more seem to take their place. One afternoon, Alfredo's lawyer visits with grim news. There's talk Arturo has made enemies in every direction, the lawyer says. Even some of your former allies are conspiring against him. They see an opportunity to carve up what's left of the organization. Alfredo listens in silence, though inside he feels the twist of inevitability. He knows Arturo's pride won't let him retreat, even when retreat is the only way to survive. Many people still think the BLO could have salvaged their power by cutting a deal or finding a truce. But what do you think? Could they ever have shared power in a world where betrayal is the norm? Or was their fate sealed the moment they declared war on Chapo? In prison, Alfredo feels increasingly powerless. He maintains his silence with the authorities, refusing every offer of leniency, but he can't ignore the creeping despair. He knows his family is fracturing without him. One night, Alfredo dreams of the hills of Sinaloa. In the dream, he's a boy again, walking a dusty trail toward the family farmhouse. He can hear Arturo calling him from the porch, just like he used to. But when Alfredo reaches the house, it's empty. The doors hang open, the rooms are silent, and he wakes with a start, heart pounding. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, the BLO's enemies sense weakness and press harder. Chapo's faction intensifies its campaign, launching targeted strikes on Arturo's safe houses and assassinating mid-level operators. At the same time, Mexican Marines raid stash houses and arrest lieutenants, often with deadly force. Alfredo receives word that another longtime associate has been killed in a shootout. He doesn't cry or shout, but a quiet weight settles deeper on his chest. Each death feels like another brick being removed from the foundation of the family's legacy. Late one evening, as he paces the narrow length of his cell, Alfredo wonders how much longer Arturo, Hector, and Carlos can withstand the onslaught. He knows the answer, even if he doesn't want to admit it. Not long, the trial process for Alfredo Beltrán Leyva becomes a spectacle, though he himself rarely speaks. Every appearance in court is flanked by armed guards, journalists snapping photographs as if documenting a ghost. He maintains the same impassive expression, never showing the prosecutors the satisfaction of fear. Inside the prison, Alfredo hears that Arturo and Hector are still fighting to hold on to what's left of the Beltrán Leyva organization. Their enemies have grown bolder. El Chapo Guzmán's faction, sensing blood in the water, strikes harder and deeper, dismantling entire cells of BLO operatives. Los Zetas push further into territories the brothers once controlled, leaving behind their signature brutality as a warning to any who resist. Historical fact: by late 2009, the BLO was effectively fractured. Infighting, pressure from rival cartels, and government operations left them a shadow of their former strength. Analysts would later point to this period as a turning point in the broader cartel wars, one that set off waves of splinter groups across Mexico. In court, prosecutors lay out a meticulous case. They speak of shipments of cocaine and heroin worth hundreds of millions of dollars, of corrupt officials on the payroll, of murders ordered to protect the empire. Alfredo listens without reacting. He has no illusions about the outcome. Many people still think Alfredo could have negotiated a lighter sentence by cooperating with authorities. But what do you think? Could a man who built his life on silence and loyalty ever betray his family and allies? While Alfredo faces his legal battles, tragedy strikes on the outside. His lawyer brings the news one gray morning. Arturo is dead. The words hit Alfredo like a physical blow. Arturo, the brother who taught him that family came first, who carried the weight of leadership when Alfredo was taken, killed in a bloody shootout with Mexican Marines. The lawyer explains that Arturo refused to surrender, fighting until the very end. Alfredo sits silently for a long time, absorbing the news. He knew Arturo's pride would never allow him to run, but the finality of his death still twists something deep inside him. Back in his cell, Alfredo replays memories of Arturo's lessons, of long nights strategizing over maps and ledgers. He wonders whether Arturo's unwavering loyalty to the family was their greatest strength, or the very thing that doomed them. The death of Arturo sends shockwaves through the organization. Hector and Carlos are left scrambling to keep the remnants together, but defections multiply. Rivals pick apart the BLO's territories like scavengers. The government seizes assets at a record pace. From his cell, Alfredo can only watch the collapse. He refuses to read the newspapers the guards slide under his door, but the whispers from other inmates tell him everything he needs to know. The empire they built together is gone. Late one night, Alfredo dreams again of Sinaloa. He sees Arturo walking ahead of him down a dusty road, but this time, his brother doesn't turn back. Alfredo calls out, but Arturo keeps walking until he disappears into the haze. Alfredo wakes with a start, heart hammering, and sits in the darkness of his cell until morning. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva's trial ends with the inevitability of a tide rolling in. The judge reads the sentence, decades behind bars, a symbolic gesture to show the world that Mexico is serious about its war on the cartels. Alfredo stands motionless, his hands cuffed, his gaze fixed forward. He doesn't flinch, doesn't plead, doesn't give the prosecutors the satisfaction of a reaction. He is escorted back to prison as the media celebrates the verdict. Headlines declare the fall of El Mochomo, one of Mexico's most notorious drug lords. Commentators speculate about what his silence in court means, some insisting he must be planning to negotiate, others convinced he will take his secrets to the grave. Alfredo ignores it all. Historical fact. In 2017, Alfredo Beltrán Leyva was ultimately sentenced to life in prison by a U.S. court after being extradited in 2014. He was ordered to forfeit over $529 million in assets, a symbolic but significant financial blow. But at this point, Alfredo is still in Mexico, still fighting the extradition that will seal his fate. Each appeal delays the process, but he knows the outcome is predetermined. They will send me north, he tells his lawyer in one of their final meetings. It's only a matter of when. Meanwhile, the organization he helped build has completely unraveled. Arturo's death created a void that Hector and Carlos cannot fill. Splinter groups form from the remnants of the BLO, each claiming loyalty to the family name, but pursuing their own interests. The once powerful network is reduced to fragments. In prison, Alfredo receives word that Carlos has been captured. The news comes as another silent blow. One by one, the brothers are being picked off. He wonders how Hector can possibly hold on alone. Many people still think Alfredo should have considered cooperating with U.S. authorities at this point, perhaps exchanging information for a reduced sentence. But what do you think? Can a man who has built his identity around loyalty truly betray the family he sacrificed everything for? Alfredo spends his nights in reflection, remembering the days in Sinaloa when he and Arturo dreamed of building something lasting. He thinks of Arturo's voice, steady and sure, telling him that family came first. Alfredo believed that then, and he believes it now, even as it costs him everything. One night, Alfredo hears shouting in the corridor outside his cell. Guards are moving quickly, keys jangling, boots striking the concrete floor. Moments later, a senior officer appears and tells him to pack his belongings. "You're being transferred," the officer says curtly. Alfredo doesn't ask where. He knows the answer. The next morning, shackled and surrounded by heavily armed escorts, Alfredo boards a plane bound for the United States. He doesn't look out the window as the plane takes off. He already knows this is the last time he will see Mexican soil as a free man. The flight to the United States is long, silent, and suffocating. Alfredo Beltrán Leyva sits shackled to his seat, flanked by armed U.S. Marshals who treat him like a ghost they can't afford to lose sight of. He doesn't speak, doesn't ask questions. He knows this moment has been inevitable since the day Mexican Marines kicked in the door of his safe house in Culiacán. When the plane lands, Alfredo is escorted through a maze of federal security protocols. The stark American prison system is a different world, colder, more clinical, and completely cut off from the outside. He's processed quickly, stripped of his belongings, and moved into an isolation unit where the walls feel closer than the narrow corridors he endured in Mexico. Historical fact. In 2017, Alfredo was sentenced by a U.S. federal court to life in prison and ordered to forfeit over $529 million in assets. His case became a symbol of how deeply cartel operations had infiltrated global drug markets and how relentless U.S. prosecutors could be once a figure of his stature was in their custody. The trial in the U.S. is swift compared to the years of legal wrangling in Mexico. Prosecutors present mountains of evidence detailing the billions of dollars worth of cocaine and heroin trafficked under Alfredo's watch. They highlight the corruption he helped perpetuate and the blood spilled in his organization's name. Through it all, Alfredo maintains the same silence he carried in Mexican courtrooms. He refuses to bargain for leniency, refuses to name names, refuses to betray the family ethos Arturo drilled into him as a boy. Family first, no matter what. When the judge finally hands down the life sentence, Alfredo nods once, a small acknowledgement that the fight is over. There is no outburst, no plea for mercy. He knows this is the end of the road. Many people still think Alfredo should have used this moment to negotiate, to trade secrets for a lighter sentence. But what do you think? Could Alfredo ever have chosen self-preservation over loyalty? Or was this outcome written from the moment he entered the cartel world? In the years that follow, Alfredo adapts to life behind American prison walls. He spends most days in solitary confinement, reading when books are available, exercising in the small yard when permitted. He rarely speaks to anyone. Inmates who try to approach him quickly learn he has no interest in alliances or idle conversation. News of the outside world trickles in only occasionally. He learns that Hector is eventually captured and sentenced. He hears that the BLO name still circulates in whispers, but is now attached to fragmented splinter groups with little of the power they once wielded. The empire he and his brothers built, with such painstaking care, has long since been dismantled. At night, Alfredo lies on the thin cot in his cell and thinks of Sinaloa, the sound of cicadas at dusk, the dusty roads winding through the hills, the warmth of Arturo's voice calling him home for dinner. He wonders if people will ever truly understand the weight of loyalty, or if they'll simply reduce him to another name in the endless ledger of the drug war. He exhales slowly, letting the memories fade into the sterile hum of the prison. He knows he will never walk free again, but he also knows he never gave the authorities what they wanted. Betrayal, and maybe, in the quiet of his cell, that is the only victory left to him. As you settle deeper into the stillness of this moment, let your breathing slow just a little. Inhale deeply, feeling the air move gently through your lungs, and exhale even more slowly, letting any tension drift away. The story of Alfredo Beltrán Leyva is heavy, a reminder of how choices ripple outwards, of how loyalty and survival can pull in opposite directions. But for now, we can set those thoughts down. Picture yourself somewhere quiet, far away from the noise of the world. Maybe it's a soft patch of grass under a starry sky, or the edge of a calm sea where the waves roll in like a lullaby. Let your mind rest there for a while. Notice the details, the warmth of the air on your skin, the subtle sounds in the distance, the way your body feels lighter with each breath. There's no urgency here, no demands, just a gentle awareness that you are safe in this moment. Each breath carries away a little more of the day's weight, leaving you calmer, softer, ready to rest. Allow your shoulders to loosen, your jaw to unclench, your hands to rest wherever they feel comfortable. You might even let your eyelids grow heavier, blinking slower as your body reminds you that rest is not just allowed. It's necessary. The world will keep spinning. The stories will keep unfolding. But right now, you have permission to pause, to let go, to slip into the quiet comfort of sleep. Good night and sweet dreams.